Good evening and welcome to our Learn and Share conference call tonight. My name is Renee Roederer and I'm the support specialist for the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. And I'm pleased to be moderating this discussion today. The topic for today is managing your epilepsy, transition tips for teens. And we are absolutely pleased to have an excellent panel of young adult speakers with us tonight. So I would love to welcome Aubrey Brown, Matthew Summerfield, Miguel Teran, and Ashley Vader. They're all members of our epilepsy community here at the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan, and I'd like to invite each one of you to briefly introduce yourself. So would you tell us about your connection to the epilepsy community and what makes this topic so important to you? I also know you're all students, so it would be great if you could tell us, where do you go to school and what are you studying? So Aubrey, how about if we start with you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Aubrey, and I have epilepsy myself, and I'm a very passionate advocate. I am currently studying at Saginaw Valley State University, and I'm studying elementary education and special education.
That is fantastic. Awesome. And Matthew, welcome to you.
Hi, nice being here with you guys, and I appreciate you guys coming out and listening to what we got to say here. So I'm Matthew Summerfield. I'm a senior at Hope College, and I study neuroscience and chemistry. And I plan to go to graduate school and pursue a career in epilepsy research. And
great.
Aside from that, I'm a huge advocate for literally everything we do.
Love it. It's so good to welcome all you all here tonight. And Miguel, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Miguel Tran. I'm an epilepsy ambassador at the national level, and this topic is sort of especially important to me because I'm a SCATS BSA leader and a first robotics competition mentor helping high school students, so this is kind of what I deal with a lot of the time, and I'm studying at the University of Michigan Dearborn, trying to pursue a career in electrical and computer science engineering.
Love it. So great. And Ashley, welcome to you as well. How about you?
Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley Vader. I also have epilepsy due to a brain malformation. I'm currently a student at Grand Valley State University. I am pursuing a degree in cognitive neuroscience. And in the meantime, I am working as a medical parapro at an elementary school, and I'm also working towards my registered behavior technician certification. And this topic is very important to me because I started having my seizures during a very pivotal transitional time, which was when I was transitioning from middle school to high school. So being a student and having that pivotal time and epilepsy coming in at the same time is, I know, very challenging. So this topic is very important to me as well.
Thank you, all of you. And as you talk about this, and as I've gotten to know you, one of the things that is very clear is that you are all working with and or mentoring people who are younger than you. And I just think there's something wonderful about that. And you've all mentioned several aspects of what makes this topic so important to you. There's no doubt the transition from teenage years to young adult years is definitely a big one. So I'd love to start here. When you think of yourself as a teenager and remember those years, what sort of questions did you have about your epilepsy back then? And if you could go back and give your younger self some advice or a pep talk, what might you say? What might you say to your younger self? So Matthew, could you start with you on this?
Yeah. So, growing up has its bumps and its ups and downs. And just because you have epilepsy or, just saying a neurological condition doesn't mean it's all down. There's just it's a lot to try to explain to someone that's transitioning from high school to college life or getting a job or just doing the next stage of life by just trying to sum it up in one sentence. So luckily there's, a group of us here that will explain it because each of us will have something else to say. And as you start transitioning and as you start becoming more and more independent or just going to the next challenge, you can look back and see what you've accomplished. And I feel that looking back and seeing what I've accomplished with epilepsy allows me to motivate myself to look forward and be like, I'm gonna be all right because I've already done this. So if I gave myself some advice, I would just tell my younger self it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be tough, and there are gonna be some tough days, but it's only gonna make you better. Yeah.
That's really lovely. Yeah, it's going to get better and it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. That's great. Miguel, what about you? How would you approach that?
Honestly, very kind of different than that. Because I didn't have a lot of control over my epilepsy, or at least I didn't feel like it, I actually didn't ask too many questions about it at the time. So really quickly going to my pep talk is just going back and saying, ask more questions early, because it makes it easier rather than it all flooding it at one time, and learning about it just kind of helps because it gives you more literacy when you go to see a neurologist or an epileptologist.
Yeah, so ask more questions earlier. And I think, one of the great things is that any of us can start that journey at any time, and it's never too late to ask those questions. But starting them earlier can be helpful. So that's good advice. Ashley, what about you?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, sorry. I'm not used to using my phone like this. So if I could go back and tell my younger self, I would tell myself to use my voice and just to talk more, because I think when you're younger, at least wherever you're transitioning from, whether it's middle school to high school to college to wherever you're going, you're in this pivotal time in your life where you need to use your voice to, like Matthew was saying, just to sum up the condition that you have, but it's not a label. It doesn't make you any different than the person next to you in the job interview. It doesn't make you any different on the college application. It doesn't make you any different than the person sitting next to you in your biology class. That you're still you, and nothing really is that different. It's just something that's a part of you. So I think just if I could go back and tell myself to just embrace the change that has happened and to just use my voice to tell my story more. Because I think when I was younger, I just didn't want anyone to know that I was different in any way. But if I could go back, I would tell everyone that this was me and that it's okay. So I think that,
excellent pep talk.
Yeah, there's your pep talk. So I think that's what I would tell myself if I were to give myself a pep talk. That's what I would tell myself.
Love that. Yeah, thank you. And Aubrey, what would you say?
I was diagnosed with epilepsy actually at 13. So at the time, I had all the questions about epilepsy. And honestly, I thought my life was over. And I would definitely give myself the pep talk along the lines of things look up and everything happens for a reason. And then I'd also agree with Ashley that, we're all beautifully different. And it just took me a long time to embrace that. So embrace the change.
Embrace the change. Yeah, that's come up multiple times here. That's great. And and getting to that place where you're like, this is part of who I am. I can still do so many of the things I want to do, and to embrace this part of yourself too. It's really lovely. So thank you all for sharing that. Those are good pep talks and things we can take to heart right now, not just for the past. I'm curious from each of you, would you share a bit about the ways you manage your epilepsy as a young adult, ways you take care of it? And as you do that, what does a day in the life of caring for epilepsy look like for you? And I'm wondering if you develop any of those rhythms or daily practices during your teenage years. Miguel, could we start with you on this one?
Sure. So for me, it's kind of like a scout where you just try and be prepared for anything. So if I'm going out for even like a couple hours, I usually just somehow try and pack a protein bar with me because one of my big triggers is low blood sugar. And so a pretty typical day that's really changed from being a teenager to a young adult is wearing a medical ID. I didn't before because my class sizes were 30 people, and now it's 100, 120. So I guess pretty typical days, just being ready to, in case something goes wrong.
Yeah, be prepared. That seems like a good motto for you with your experience with Scouts. That's great. And Ashley, what about you? What does it look like for you?
So for me, it's similar to Miguel, definitely. Is that I have the medical ID, I have an ID on my backpack, and then I also have a bag for my emergency medication, and then I also have a laminated sheet of paper in my emergency medication bag that gives the instructions for first aid for seizures. That also has a lovely picture of me holding a goat so that people can match that. Because I'm always holding a goat that can match that's me, that's on the ground possibly, or in the chair or wherever, to the instructions. And that's since I've gone to college that I have those things with me. Now when I was in high school, I just had the medical ID, and I had teachers, and like Miguel said, the class sizes were smaller and everyone knew. But when I got to college, I think it's more of sharing. And with jobs, it's a lot of sharing. The second I'm with a new person, it's telling them right away that I have epilepsy. Here's what you do if something happens. The odds of something happening, for the time that we're together are very limited. But if it does, here's what you do. And just talking and telling just the person next to me that this may or may not happen, just so that you're aware, so that no one's caught off guard. I think that's the best way of handling things.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, thanks. Aubrey, what does a day in the life look like for you?
Well, I am very scheduled. My life comes down to scheduling, like when I eat my meals. And if I'm not eating my lunch at a certain time, then my whole day is thrown off, and that's not fun. So to take care of my epilepsy, I sleep all the time, honestly, way more than most of my classmates. I make sure that I take my medication at a certain time as well, and it's important for me to understand my own limits, which was frustrating for me to understand at first because they're so different from my classmates. Like I had friends in college going out and doing fun stuff, and I had to say, well, I can't do that because I need to sleep. But now I am very grateful for that because my seizures are more controlled.
Yeah, sleep is so, so important. I'm really glad you brought that up. And I'm sure our teenagers here too can relate to that and some of those questions. Matthew, what does a day in the life look like for you as you care for epilepsy?
Every day, honestly, I'm a very repetitive person. I'm a creature of habit. Every day is the same thing. I make sure I have my medications ready to go at the same time. If I'm not going to be at home or in my dorm where my meds are, I keep them in a bag with me in my backpack, whether I be in the lab or studying. And I roughly eat the same thing every day because I just think, listen, it works for me. I didn't have any seizures when I ate this. It's not like that would cause a seizure, but just me thinking that way. I don't deviate from the path that much. And then I try to work out every day because one of the big things that causes my seizures is just stress. The stress will lead to not only just bad mental health, but bad physical health, eventually leading to a culmination of other things, and then eventually a seizure. And so I try to, work out every day, even if it's just a run or something, just to clear my mind and even just disconnect for a little bit. But that's pretty much a day.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing those habits. And that sense of really trying to shape what your day looks like and trying to maximize your health and what you need, which I think is great. Another question is kind of about a set of questions. There is no doubt that the transition to young adulthood does involve a lot of questions and a lot of decisions and, in process kind of things. But things like, do I want to go to college? And if so, what do I want to study there? Do I want a job? And if so, how do I get the best training for that? How do I stay connected to family members and also develop some more independence too? How do I develop important friendships and relationships in my life? So these kinds of questions, and perhaps others too, when you were younger, how did you engage those questions? And I'm curious what sort of values guided you in making decisions around those questions. Ashley, could we start with you?
Yeah, so for me, going to college was actually not originally on the table because my seizures were pretty much out of control by the end of my senior year of high school. So I was looking at community college, which was about less than a half hour away from my house. And then I ended up having my best friend was going to go to the university that I ended up going to for my first degree, which was Western Michigan University. And we ended up moving in together in the dorm, and she was written off as my caretaker when I ended up signing up with the Disability for Student Services office. So if you are planning on going to college, I would definitely recommend signing up and getting in touch with your Disability for Student Services office and seeing what they have to offer and how they can help in any capacity, and if you think that it's something that can help you. And when it came to what I wanted to study, at that point, I really wanted to study art and psychology, so I got a degree in both. And I did hold jobs when I was in college at that time. I was a baton twirling instructor, and so was my best friend that I lived with. And I also worked at a laundromat, which I had a boss that was very flexible with my epilepsy, and if I couldn't come to work because of the seizure, I didn't have to come to work. And we were very communicative with my situation, and there's paperwork to fill out for those kinds of things. And then when I moved to Grand Valley, I actually moved in with a family that is also involved with the Epilepsy Foundation. And then you had 2 kids with epilepsy that lived in the same house, so that was easier for us both. And, if you know the Agee family, I lived with them, and Kathy, I think, just somehow kept her head on straight with Lizzie and I. So that's where I live with Lizzie and I both having epilepsy, so we just take care of each other. But as far as independence goes, I think that with college, whether it's from home or going to actually live on campus, you form independence with your classes. And even if it's just to go into getting a job of any kind, you will form independence by having a job too as well.
So lots of good advice in there. Thank you for that, and appreciate that perspective. Aubrey, what kind of guided you as you thought about these questions about direction? What guided you in that?
Well, I knew I always wanted to go to college, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. At the point, I think it was my sophomore year, I still wanted to be in medical school, but that definitely was not going to work out for me because of all my fears that happen in the medical field. So I then figured out that I wanted to work with kids, and teaching just kind of fell into place, and I was very lucky that I was able to figure that out so quickly. For my job, for my very first job, I was 17, and right off the bat, I know this is something that you're not always supposed to do, but I told my boss, I said, before you hire me, I want you to know that I have epilepsy, and thankfully he was very understanding, and I still work at this job to this day. So I feel like having an understanding employer is huge. I'm still working on independence, I'll admit. I'm an only child, so I struggle with that a little bit more. And I've always kept my family and my friends as my number one in life.
Oh, those are really good responses too. And I think too with young adulthood, I mean, there is a reason people call it emerging adulthood. It is, you gain more independence and interdependence over time too. And I just appreciate the ways that you've thought about directions you want to go in. That's really great. Matthew, how did you make some of those decisions, and where is it leading you?
Well, mine's a bit long.
That's okay.
The idea of doing what I want to do or being independent or whatever. Everybody wants to be independent or free to do what they want to do. And as far as my life and career choices, I never really wanted to go to college, which is kind of a first world problem. I always wanted to join the military, and I wanted to go to West Point, and I got in, and I said in the opening application, I said, hey, listen, I have epilepsy. It's controlled with medication. If you think I have a chance, then, give me a shot. And they let me in and complete the rest of the application process. But it was up to the Department of Defense to grant me a medical waiver. And after I got in, about a month later, the Department of Defense sent me a letter saying that my medical waiver was denied. And so obviously I didn't go there. And I accepted that as the hard truth, but it was obviously it makes sense. But nonetheless, it was something that kind of shook me because I wasn't ready to consider like regular college. And so like for a bit, I was like off my toes. I'm like, okay, like how do I do what I want to do without knowing what I want to do? And immediately I thought of like, what am I good at? I'm like, well, I'm good at helping people. And so I'm like, oh, I'll go be a doctor. and I'll go be a neurologist. I'll see epilepsy patients. It'll be great. And as I went to college, I did research. I really liked research. And I realized that medical school is pretty intense, and that's just not good for someone with epilepsy, as far as sleep deprivation and stress. And so that was another, shot at my ego. And I'm like, okay, now what do I do? I still want to help people with epilepsy. And so now I'm in pursuit of a PhD where I can be a neuroscientist and do research on the next level of remedies, potential medications, therapies, and just help the general understanding of epilepsy treatment altogether. But I'm still dependent on everything, actually. I can't say I'm independent of anything because I rely on people. And, I mean, you never go through anything by yourself. So that's a really long, strong answer of how I come to
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
It's a really good answer. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you get a message out of that, good. If it was a bunch of rambling, sorry.
Oh, I heard several messages in there that I was like, ooh, let's pull that out. I mean, I think I always tell people independence is a myth. I mean, in the sense, there is no true full independence. We all rely on each other. And yet we can really bolster each other and ourselves in having, some of the freedom to make choices we want. And I hear that, as you're saying, like, even though your path was changing at different times, like, you still had choices and, you're still moving in this really exciting direction. And I would say, too, to any young person listening, like, that pathway of, like, what you do, what you care about, who you're connected to, that just continues to morph throughout life. And I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure for high school students to get to college and know exactly what they're going to do with their lives. And, even later in adulthood, things change and, you may take on different aspects. So I think you really listed up a lot of great things there. Miguel, how about you? How have you kind of answered some of these questions? And, I'm sure they're still in process as you're studying. So, what about you?
Well, technically, this is my sophomore year of college and my first ever year on campus. So, I've lived at home, and I kind of plan to in the future. But I do a lot of volunteer work, so I can't really say too much on job. But if you're someone who's too worried about doing, I guess, a job, but are into volunteering or like a extracurricular kind of student activity, take time and pride in that. I can't speak much on jobs, but I can tell you that when people see something like Eagle Scout on my application, they're like, oh, okay. And they take another look and they kind of go, okay, you did it with epilepsy. That's just an extra challenge, not a detriment.
I really like that phrase too. That's an extra challenge, not a detriment. Yeah. There's so much you all have been able to do and will do. There's no doubt about it. You're already on that pathway, which is really, really cool. And I love what you said too, Miguel, about like follow those passions, not just the things that are going to be about a job later, but just things you enjoy. Like you're doing robotics. That's so great. And also fun things. You all have already mentioned some things you all do for fun too, and that's important. That's a part of who you are and who you're becoming, just as much as any of the things that would end up on a resume. So I really appreciate everything you all have just shared. Another question, and I realize that even this may still be in transition for you all, but as teenagers transition to a young adulthood, they'll often gradually make a transition from seeing a pediatric neurologist or epileptologist, maybe who they've seen for a very long time, to seeing an adult neurologist or epileptologist. And I'm wondering what that transition has been like for you. Maybe for some of you it's still underway. What tips would you have for other teenagers in that process? And could we start with Aubrey?
All right. So I currently see a pediatric epileptologist, and I am beginning to get prepared for the transition. However, I'm only 20, and I can be with my epileptologist until I'm 26. So I'm planning on keeping my care with my doctor until I'm 26. But a tip that I would have is start getting ready for the transition early on. Don't wait until the last minute, because your epileptologist or neurologist may have recommendations for you that would fit your personality better than you just choosing a random doctor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, ask your current doctor who they might recommend, who might be a good fit for your epilepsy, but also who you are. I think finding that fit and and that kind of camaraderie is really, really important. Matthew, anything you would add?
I started out seeing a general neurologist at a children's hospital. And I wasn't getting any better. And so that went on for like 4 years, and then I was like, 15 or 16. And we're like, okay, we need to see a specialist, an epileptologist. But there was no pediatric, and we're like, well, I'm getting older. My parents are like, he's getting older. Why don't we just try to push for an adult epileptologist? And I believe we were given the suggestion by the foundation actually to, we recommend seeing like these 3 people. Like they're beyond the call for caring for epilepsy patients. And it's a process. There are such things as a wait list. So that process, if you do want to do a transfer, it has to begin early. There was a whole thing. I'm like, well, I was 16 at the moment, and they're like, well, you're technically not an adult. And we had to like convince them, like, well, when you eventually see him, he will be an adult. And so we just started the process early, and that made things more fluent. And now I see a specialist, and the specialist only sees epilepsy patients, whereas before I was being treated by a neurologist who sees an array of neurological conditions. And it's a different interaction for each appointment. But definitely, if my one tip of advice, once you decide to do a transfer between adult or from pediatric to adult, start that process early, because there are wait lists to seeing your next doc.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thanks. Miguel, anything you would add, or any advice you might have?
A mix between giving it to the teenagers and the parents. I at least have like a little kind of photo book where I just use index cards, and I've written down every seizure, every medication change, everything like that. So that way, going forward, not just with epilepsy and changing doctors, but just in general, as you start to take over of, oh, you're 18, you have to handle these forms now, and you have to sign them and do everything on them. Just having all of that information instead of having to search through like 30 documents. So just put it all in one place.
That is excellent advice. Yeah, and then it's probably empowering to know that you have that right there at your disposal. You don't have to go searching for it. You don't have to have it all memorized. It's just right there. That's a really good idea. Ashley, how about you?
So by the time I was actually actively diagnosed, I had seizures for about 7 years, and so I was an adult when I actually was diagnosed. So I saw a neuroepileptologist in Cleveland, Ohio, at the Cleveland Clinic, and he has been my neuroepileptologist ever since then. So I can't speak too much about transitioning because I was already an adult legally. But I will say that, like Miguel said, if you have everything already put together and you keep everything in one spot, it makes appointments a lot smoother. Because if you have had any changes and they ask you, has anything changed over the last however many months your appointments are apart, 6 months, 12 months, or if you have 2 months, 4 months, then you can look right at the dates and have exactly what they need to hear or see right where you need to have it. And also that insurance stuff is easier to find when they ask for it. So I think that's best to have everything all together. But as all my friends who have already done the transition have mentioned, I think everything they said is right on it.
Yeah, that's lots of good stuff in there. Thank you so much for that. When teenagers hit those milestones of becoming 15 and 16, obviously there are a lot of questions, hopes, frustrations about the possibility of driving, or as is often the case, the inability to drive. I'm curious, how has that impacted you as a teenager and as a young adult now, and how do you navigate those needs around transportation? Matthew, can we start with you?
Yeah, so it's a rite of passage in our society, literally defined as a rite of passage, that you turn 16, you get your driver's license. Like it's just really common. And well, for someone with epilepsy, it's less common. And for me to say, like, you just have to accept it, although it be the truth, it's hard to accept because, you see all your friends, you get a license, yada, yada, yada. You are now excluded from that event. And it's sad. You see all your friends having fun. But honestly, that's where you find your true friends. Because they'll offer you, you got practice or whatever. They'll offer you a ride. You're like, oh, dude, I'll take you home from school today. I was fortunate enough to have an older brother to drive me to school, and then he graduated, and then we had neighbors that lived real close by, and they would take me to school with them. Or my friend lived a couple blocks down, and he'd take me to practice because we had hockey practice. And it's a learning moment in its own moment of kind of weakness, because it's just, you're sad, but nonetheless it's just another something you have to chalk up to living with epilepsy that some people just, they don't understand. And it's not like, nothing to be sad about. Heck, if anything, you're saving money, because guess what? You don't have to buy a car or pay for gas.
Yeah.
So that's a plus.
That's true. That's, I think it's really important that you lifted up that rite of passage piece, because, yeah, you sort of think about the practicalities of how do you get from here to there. Who do you ask? How do you ask? But, yeah, there's that sense of rite of passage. And at the same time, as you said, like, it'll work out. You said earlier. I think that's really helpful for people to hear. Miguel, anything you'd like to share on this?
I can't say anything but echo what Matthew said, really, because you're going to find those true friends and family friends and relationships that are going to stick through because of driving. I won't say the scout phrase, but scout leaders might recognize some of the goods that not driving can do. It gives you time to do other stuff, because I had periods where it's like, okay, I had a seizure. Oh, just reset the clock for 6 months. It also gives you just, for those who have seizures somewhat under control, I don't even tell my friends I had a seizure anymore. I say reset the clock, because that just helps them understand too. So just echoing Matthew, you're going to find those true friends who can give you a ride or get you where you need to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. Yeah, those true friends. I mean, that is interdependence. That is that sense of, being cared for and helped. And then you all also, as I know, are so helpful in caring toward your friends in other ways too. And it's just the giving and receiving. It's really lovely. Let's see. Ashley, what would you say to this?
So we're all gonna go back to Matthew. Yes, this is definitely the rite of passage, and I do remember sophomore year of high school and everyone who got their license and had their keys walking down the hallway, they're flipping their car keys, and knowing that I was not going to flip my car keys, and I was okay with that, because I knew that I would find my way around it, because you know what, at some point someone's going to get a flat tire, and they're also going to have to walk just like me. Because when you think of it that way, people get flat tires, people's engines go out, but just think of it this way, you don't have to pay for it. But
I love how every one of you has flipped the script, and you're like, oh, and here's a benefit.
Here is a benefit. But it does stink. Like, you just do have to say, some stuff just sucks. And the driving thing, yeah, it does suck. But when you get older, like I'm old, I'm only 23. When you get older, you learn to navigate those things. You learn how, okay, I can walk to this store. I can, maybe you can ride your bike, to where you're trying to get to. Ask a friend, and just like Miguel and Matthew just said, you really do find out who your friends are. That's definitely in a song somewhere. You find out who your friends are, who can drive you places, in your family, and know that there's always going to be support for you. And I think that finding that support and knowing that, your friends and family will be there for you, and to also just ask for the ride too, because the worst thing that can happen is that someone says, no, I can't, and then you go and you ask the next person. And I think for me too is that when I got to college, I really started using public transportation. So when public transportation, if it's available to you, finding the maps, and also knowing that the transportation services, they learn first aid, they're required to. So if something were to happen to you, they should know what to do and can take care of that, So I've always taken buses everywhere, and it was the best service I ever had because I never had to drive, and I could just ride for free with my school. So I think that, finding your friends and learning public transportation too, it's a life skill, public transportation is. So, yeah.
That's good. Aubrey, anything you'd add?
Well, I think everything that everyone else has said is absolutely spot on, but I will admit I did not want to drive. So when I got my license at 17, honestly, it was kind of exciting at first, and then it was kind of like a meh, because I realized I have to pay for gas, I have to drive myself places, now people are expecting me to do this, and so it's not that great, honestly.
You all have all clearly embraced this, even though it is difficult in some ways. You, as you said, you've embraced this, and you're sort of uplifting some of the positive aspects, and that's really lovely. So I think that's really great. So I'm also curious. Have there been times in your teenage years, or maybe in your young adult years now, where you've had to advocate for yourself in the educational setting? And what was that like? And in addition to that, are there other ways that you have gotten involved with epilepsy advocacy? I already know the answer is yes for all of you, so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And Miguel, could we start with you?
Sure. So advocating for myself in school hasn't been too much of a challenge. I will still remember, because I was so self-conscious as a student, texting a friend one day when I had a seizure because we had a test in chemistry that day, and I wanted to make sure the teacher knew I wasn't skipping. And with my choir, they always gave me the side room because of the cabin, because we did a retreat kind of thing every year. Because all the other guys would like to stay up all night and then complain about being tired the next day, which doesn't make sense to me. But on the advocacy front, I've sort of recently started more than many others here. I did a little bit through my troop when one of the leaders actually invited me to kind of teach seizure first aid for first aid merit badge because I had a seizure at summer camp. And so they were going to listen and they were going to pay attention, everyone who was in that class. But advocacy, it doesn't have to just be standing up for yourself, but also for others. And just, it doesn't have to be atypical, just do a post. Do different things. I'm doing it more with my robotics team as a mentor now, and I'm going back and I'm looking to do it not only in my troop, but in other troops throughout our district to kind of help spread that idea and help people understand a little more.
That's great. The awareness and the hands-on, like, first aid training is super important. And you've been doing some mental health awareness training too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, first aid. What has that been like?
With the situation in college and everything like that, it's not been a big thing because everybody, I'm just going to say this in college because I'm at more of a commuter college. If people don't have to be there, they don't like to be. So it's kind of in and out. So I haven't had to use it much, but being ready, once again, be prepared as a scout, just it's that same philosophy because if I can identify those same problems with myself, it also helps reduce my stress, which helps me have less seizures. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's really exciting that you've been asked to do seizure first aid training and mental health first aid training because, you know, people can learn that from a variety of sources, but I think when it's a young person doing it, you know, probably a lot of people your age can relate to you as a leader in that, and I think that's really, really great. Ashley, how would you answer this?
Yeah, so I think one of my educational experiences was that I was the only person in my high school. I went to a very small high school. The only person in my high school with epilepsy that they had like within the last 7 years of me being a freshman. So all of the staff had to redo their training in seizure first aid, and it was a little rocky, and I had a lot of adults that were very scared. So it was quite a learning curve for us all, and we all did it together. So I think that we had to, I say we because it was all the adults with me at my high school, definitely had to advocate for myself, and we did it as a team at my high school. And then when I got to college, I ran some events at Western's campus. I did 2 football games that were sponsored by the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. And then I am a Purple Day ambassador, which if you haven't heard of that, that's a fundraiser that is done every year. That's really fun. Everyone wears purple. It's a great time. Who doesn't love purple? I sure do. And then I think all those experiences were just some of my favorite, but my absolute favorite that I do, I've been a camp counselor at North Star Reach, and my favorite week is Camp Discovery, which is sponsored by the Michigan Epilepsy Foundation, and it is our epilepsy week. So we have all campers that have epilepsy that come to that week, and it's a summer camp, so we have all the camp activities that everyone gets to participate, and all the kids have epilepsy for that week. And it's just my favorite because they love hearing that I have epilepsy too, and that I'm an adult. That's what I get told the most, is that, but you're an adult. And I told them, yeah, and one day you'll be an adult and you'll be just fine. And it's just, they're great kids, and it's great to see them so happy for that entire week.
That's really sweet. I mean, and everything you all have said so far, I mean, you're a model for people your age and younger, and honestly for the older adults in your life too. And I just think it's really great. Aubrey, how have you been an advocate for yourself and for others?
Well, I started advocating later on in my journey with epilepsy. At first, I struggled to even admit that I had epilepsy. I didn't want my teachers to even know. And when I first came out with my epilepsy, it was at a hockey game, and my mom just cried her eyes out because she was so proud that I finally had admitted to it, and it was 3 years after my diagnosis. I now have to advocate for myself in my college classes at the beginning of the year by letting my professors know that I have epilepsy and what accommodations I have. And when I told one of my teachers that, he then told me that he had no idea what to do if I was to have a seizure in the classroom. So that's why the Seizure Safe Schools Act is so important to me, because I would never want anyone to be in a situation with someone who isn't able to help them. So now I've advocated through many platforms, including Team Speak Up, as a representative and an ambassador, and I am now advocating at the national level as an epilepsy advocacy champion.
Love it. Yeah. And for those who may not know, the Seizure Safe Schools Act is something that we at the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan have been advocating for a long time, that all school personnel would be required to be trained in seizure first aid. And that is so crucial. And, you know, I say thank you, Aubrey, and also your family for participating in that. Really great. And Matthew, how about you?
I mean, I always try to inform everybody in every single situation I can ever possibly be in, because that's just who I am. In a lot of situations, everything's been the same. There's been like a misunderstanding about what epilepsy is, or how, like, epilepsy first aid. They're like, oh, you're supposed to do this. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And they're like, well, who are you to say? I'm like, I have epilepsy. This is what you need to do. I've been in situations where I had a seizure at school, and for like 2 weeks, people just like straight up avoided me because, you know, why not? And I'm like, okay, like, this is kind of an issue. You got to realize that you can inform yourself, but most people won't take initiative and do that. So, like many of us do, we inform our teachers, our administrators, our coaches, our employers, anyone that we interact with, really. And so generally, like, whenever on the first day of classes now, just to give brief examples, I tell the teacher, hey, this is what it is. I have epilepsy. This is how you need to respond when I have a seizure. If I have a friend in the class, they already know what to do. I say, that person right there, they'll be in charge of me. You just call 911. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. And then sometimes some people will be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So-and-so, their sibling or someone they know or a friend, you know, everybody knows someone with epilepsy, but not everybody knows what to do in the event of a seizure. And I find that extremely concerning, because I want to live in a society that's safe for everybody. And so through that, or through the different advocacy events I do, which is just general awareness, to the stigma, to the need for research funds, to just general awareness of epilepsy, to create a more informed society, is something that we all strive for, right? But just there's been several interactions I've had that I guess not only like hurt me because I'm like, really? I'm like, do you just really say that? But you know, if it's hurting me, it's hurting the epilepsy community, and I don't like that. I don't like that one bit.
Yeah, when it hurts any of us, it hurts all of us, and the work that you all are doing that may benefit yourself and definitely others just compounds. And I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, who you all are, and just the ways that you live this out. And it's really great that we get to do it together too. You know, we're compounding all of that. It's great. And speaking of that, a little more than a year ago, the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan started a young adult group for young adults ages 18 through 25, and we meet over Zoom on the second and fourth Sundays of the month from 7 to 8 p.m., and I know you're all connected to that community. I'm wondering, what has it been like for you to meet other young adults with epilepsy through that context? And Ashley, I'm wondering if we could start with you.
Yeah, so for me, I think that when you're told that you have something that makes you quote unquote different than everyone else, you immediately want to cling on and find other people who are like you. At least that's how I am. I don't know if that's how anybody else is, but that is how I am. So when I was diagnosed with epilepsy, like when I was 19, I was desperate to find people who were like me. And for the first time was a bunch of kids at a summer camp, and I felt the most comfortable I had ever been, and it was all kids. So for me to find people my age, young adults, I was even more comfortable, and I feel like I have made more relationships and friendships in that group, because when you have something, you want to share it with other people, and you want to know, you know, is there something that works for you? Did this happen to you? Is this what happens when you have a seizure? Do you ever feel like this when you wake up in the morning? Do you have a hard time sleeping? You know, you can ask each other those types of questions that you don't really ask your friends if they don't have a neurological condition, because they won't have the same answers as people who share the same thing as you do. So I think that the group has been very beneficial for me personally.
Yeah, that's lovely. Aubrey, how about you?
My friends with epilepsy are honestly the reason that I have a voice, because when I was first diagnosed, I thought that I was the only person ever on this earth to have epilepsy. And so to have this group is honestly everything to me. I look forward to meeting everyone every Sunday or every second Sunday, and it's just honestly one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, that is great. I really think it's a game changer when people meet other folks. And then also, I mean, did any of you grow up knowing that 1 in 26 people will have an epilepsy diagnosis at some point in their lives? I sure didn't. And I think maybe even people on this call or people who are hearing this recording, that may be surprising how prevalent epilepsy is. But, you know, if you don't know anybody else, it can feel really isolating. Matthew, anything you would add?
Yeah. So growing up, before I had epilepsy, my older brother had epilepsy for maybe 4 years. And then he grew out of it, and then a couple of years went by, and I started having grand mal seizures. And so my family was somewhat familiar with, you know, what epilepsy is, but there's just two different forms. And at that time, I didn't know anybody else. You know, it's pretty stereotypical, but true that when you get diagnosed with epilepsy, it's like, don't tell anybody, you'll be judged differently. And yeah, I took that personally, and, ever since then I walked around with a chip on my shoulder because I thought I had to defend myself against stuff and prove that I'm a quote unquote normal, healthy human being. And, I can't just walk up to my friends and be like, seizures, am I right? Because, no one understands. But then having this group, we all have the common struggle. This is the in-group. Especially when you're young adults, because there's so much stuff going on in your life that's expected out of you, and you're just trying to manage your own health. And that's enough on its own. And so to have a small group even that you can share your struggles with is, well, therapy in itself, but also a family.
Yeah, I feel that too, and it's really, really special. Yeah, thanks for that. And Miguel, how about you?
Yeah, it was a gigantic difference. I knew I started to look into the statistics, the 1 in 26 figure and stuff like that. So I knew there was a high chance that there was probably at least somebody else at my high school with epilepsy, but never any conversations. So then, twice a month to turn on Zoom and to have an array of faces just spread across the screen who all understand and are in that, I always say it when new people come into the group, that Goldilocks zone where it's not that friend that is tries to pass it off, or not that friend that's super overactive about it, any little twitch, are you okay kind of thing, but that those people that just understand not only the struggle but the level of concern is just amazing.
The Goldilocks zone. I love that you say that, and I have quoted you on that too, because I think that is true, and that's what we're about. And I also think, I'm not a young adult anymore, but knowing a lot of young adults in my life, I think it's also helpful for you all to be in a place where young adults right now are living a transitional age range in their lives where a lot of transition happens, while the world is in transition. The things we have gone through collectively in this country and in this world over the last few years have been really big. And so I think young adulthood in an era like that is a very unique thing to navigate, and I'm really glad that you all have each other and you're so encouraging of each other. And this is a great time for me to tell our teenagers who are on this call, you don't have to wait until you're a young adult to have a group like that, because we have a monthly group for teenagers. It's new. We just started it, and we are meeting on the third Thursday of the month from 5 to 6 p.m., the third Thursday, 5 to 6 p.m. So if you're listening to this live, our next gathering, and it will be over Zoom, is on October 21st. But if you're hearing this another time, please know every third Thursday you can count on that. Teenagers ages 13 to 17. It's a place for you to meet other teenagers with epilepsy. And this group really came out of a program we did this summer called eSmart, and a few of our teenagers who did that program are here tonight, which is really, really great. But I know it's really meaningful to connect with other people who have epilepsy. It really does change things. If you want to know how to join up with that group, you can go to our website. You can call our Here For You helpline, which is 1-800-377-6226. You can look up Renee Roderer on the staff page and email me any of those ways, and we will get you connected to that teenage group too. And speaking of that, I think now might be a good time to open it up to our audience, so to speak, for a time of questions. You may have questions of anybody who's spoken tonight or all of them collectively. I would say, so we're going to unmute the lines here in a moment, but if you're not speaking, please do keep your phone muted so that we don't get any background noise. So Russ, would you unmute our lines? And if you have a There it is. I would definitely like our teenagers who are here, if they have questions, to be able to speak tonight. So let's make sure we give them space. But anybody can ask a question. Would anyone like to do that now? What question do you have?
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. It's me, Nathan. I'm at work right now.
Hey, Nathan. Nathan is also one of our young adults in our, group that meets on second and fourth Sundays. And it's good to have you here, Nathan. I'm glad you're here too.
Yes, I
Great.
called in a few minutes ago. Sorry, I know it's on
That's
my
okay.
brain.
Yeah, I know. That's all right. I'm just glad you could make it.
I just wanted to see how you guys are doing, and I do have one question, and then I gotta hang up and get back to work.
Go for it.
Yeah. Have you had to make any medication changes over the past few years?
Great question. And to any of you, feel free to answer that.
There's no right or wrong answer to this question. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, if you had to make some medication changes, what was that like?
I can go ahead and answer. Yes, a lot. Medication changes, not just in medication type, but also concentration, time at which I'm taking them, and combination of this medication and this medication at different doses, and just, yes, a lot of medication changes because for my type of epilepsy, that is my only tool of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So medication
okay, guys. I gotta get back to work, but it was nice stopping by.
I'm glad you stopped by.
All right, I'll see you.
Great. Okay. We will see you very soon. Okay. Who else has a question tonight?
Bye.
Anyone, especially our teenagers who are on the line. If you have a question, feel free to chime in. And if not, I have more questions. So here's one for you all, and anybody can answer this. Are there resources that you would recommend to teenagers? Things like books, podcasts, Instagram and TikTok influencers, groups people could join, any other kinds of resources. What would you recommend?
If I can go, Reddit has a pretty good community that's regulated pretty well, r/epilepsy, stuff that works. There is that exists. I'm not in that a lot, but there are a lot of good places, and there's a lot of stuff on Instagram just because no one else mentioned SoCal Epilepsy, Epilepsy.living, and Seizures Are Okay. And also, I know a big thing is growing up and like having epilepsy and going, who else in this world can kind of get by with this, and not just us being advocates, but if you're into esports, the caster Geo actually has epilepsy and has spoken about it, and it's really worth it. So go check those people out.
Good recommendations. Anybody else have recommendations?
Yes. I have a book that I love reading. It's called The Thing with the Feathers, and it's about a girl who has epilepsy. And it's not a true story, but it just makes epilepsy seem normal, and it's just incredibly written. I love the book. And then for Instagram, I love the Cameron Boyce Foundation. They are just incredible. I grew up as a huge fan of Cameron Boyce, so seeing that he is just like me has been huge for me.
Love that, yeah. Any other recommendations?
I have a couple.
Okay.
So I really like the book. It's called Brain Rules by John Medina, Medina. It's a really good book about how to take care of your brain and make it healthy. And then I also really like to use this app. It's called Calm, and it's just like it says. It's a calming app. So it's a mindfulness and meditation app. I like to use it at least once, if not twice a day. Really good app. So if you want to check it out, it's a good one.
That is a good app. Another app for mental health and relaxation, mindfulness is called Headspace. It's another one you all might check out. All right, good recommendations. Thank you all. Anybody else have a question for our panelists?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Does anyone have a seizure alert dog?
A what dog?
A seizure alert dog.
I do.
Oh, that's Noah talking, isn't it? Noah, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I have a seizure alert dog.
And has that been helpful for you?
What?
Yeah, Noah, do you want to speak a little bit about your dog, or maybe how you got your dog, anything like that?
We had to do a fundraiser for him because of how expensive he was. Our school was generous of doing it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that is one of the things that can be difficult about getting a seizure alert dog, seizure detection dog, is they are often very expensive. There are some organizations out there that you can get in touch with, Pause for a Cause. There is a foundation called Josh Provides that sometimes helps with epilepsy-related costs, and sometimes when people are curious about seizure detection dogs, I will send them there. Sometimes people find it helpful to train a dog that they have, or a dog that is a puppy, to just be like an emotional support animal, to be a calming presence. And sometimes I also know people, you never know how it's going to go, but I do know folks in
then it would work therapy, not an alert, that it wouldn't be a...
That's right. That'd be very different dog. That's right, Noah. Yeah, that they may be different kind of purposes. So, but some people find that to be helpful as well. But having a dog that's formally trained can be really helpful to alert, to detect, to get help. And yeah, that's really great. Good question. Yeah. Anybody else have a question?
This is Russ. Noah, can you talk a little bit about what specifically your dog does for you, what it's been trained to do for you?
We're still working on that, but he's supposed to hit a doggy doorbell when he senses the seizures.
Oh, great.
That's very helpful.
Has that worked yet? I mean, has he had any success in being able to?
I think we're still working. He knows the scent. He just does. We're trying to teach him the doorbell when the seizure's going off.
Great. Sounds like it's a process, but it sounds like you're making some progress with that. Great.
That's great.
And he knows the difference between a fake seizure and a real seizure.
So he's getting good at that. That's great. That's great. Thank you. And does anyone have questions of our panelists? Anything else that maybe you heard tonight, or maybe a comment? Did you hear something that was helpful? You thought, oh man, I relate to that, or thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I
anything
related
you'd like to
people ignoring me when I first went back to school.
When
they found out I had seizures, because they thought it was kind of like the flu or something.
Yeah, was it helpful to hear, Noah, the ways that they have, found friends that have been really helpful and been present to them? Yeah, I think a lot of people with epilepsy have, unfortunately, it shouldn't be this way, have had that experience where people tend to be afraid of what they don't know or understand, and sometimes, have that fear response. But there are other people who are compassionate, who are willing to learn, who are willing to help, and that makes a big, big difference. Yeah, I'm glad that, you felt like you could relate to what they were saying tonight. It's good.
Only because my mom told me that when I first went back that's what people were doing. Like, they didn't want to me when they found out.
And that's really hard. It shouldn't be that way. Yeah.
My memory was really bad then, though, but so I didn't really get it when it was that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering why they weren't coming around, probably.
Mm. Yeah, and I know it was really awesome having you in our program this summer with the other teenagers, and I think sort of just like they were saying, how helpful it's been to meet other people their age with epilepsy. It was great to have you in that group. So we had, people 13 to 17 who all had epilepsy, and even though people had different experiences and different types of epilepsy, there was so much in common there, and that was really, really helpful, I think, for a lot of people. Good. Well, I have another question for our panelists. I am wondering if you would say that epilepsy has made you a resilient person. And if so, what might you like to say to that or about that? And I'll just open that up to any of you. Has epilepsy made you a resilient person, and if so, how?
What's resilient?
Yeah, resilient means, I think, being able to navigate change and work through conflict. And I don't know if any of you are hearing my voice echoes. I'm hearing that in my own phone. So I think I'm just going to turn it over to our panelists. Has epilepsy made you resilient? How would you define that resilience? Let's say that.
I would say that epilepsy has definitely made me a resilient person. I'm able to go through so much more than I ever have. I went from being this scared little girl to now being able to speak up for myself and make my own doctor appointment and just do so much that I thought I would never be able to do.
Which is amazing, that's great. Any of the rest of you, what is that? Has it made you resilient, and what does that feel like?
I could be
in some ways, I feel it has. After a seizure, you got to get back up, and that's not easy all the time, and it makes everything harder. Any achievement that you get, you're having to work that much harder for. So in that way, yes. In other ways, you kind of have to be more sensitive to, what your body's saying. So I could push myself a little more athletically and with sleep before, but with epilepsy, that's just not an option. It's your body says a warning, and if you don't heed it, it kind of goes downhill from there.
Which can be hard to, have to learn, and yet at the same time, that is a skill too. I think to listen to your body, to know your body's cues, to know what you need, and there's something resilient about that, I think. Thanks for sharing that. Matthew or Ashley, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say it has definitely made me a resilient human being in all aspects of my life. They always say you never get to pick the hand you're dealt. You just got to know how to play it. And it's being said that this is a neurological disorder. Get teased for being the kid with epilepsy, and in a lot of aspects of my life, it was as if I had one arm tied behind my back. And there was a point in time where I'm like, okay, enough is enough. I'm just going to bite the bullet and do everything to the best of my ability. And, like I said earlier, I wear epilepsy on my sleeve, and quite literally, I have a tattoo on my right shoulder that says, all I do is fight. And every morning I look in the mirror and it's time to fight, because every day you have to survive. And, so in school, school's hard enough, but you have epilepsy, you're taking medications, the medication slows down brain signaling, your brain signaling slows down, your attention goes away, your cognition goes away, it takes more time to process stuff. And so for me to understand today's lecture or do the homework, could take twice as long as if I didn't have epilepsy. Same thing for athletics. I could be running, playing hockey, weightlifting, and no matter what I'm doing, in the middle of it, I'm yawning. Why am I yawning? Because I'm so tired. I'm tired because I'm taking all these medications. And I live with it. So for me to be able to do what I do while having this condition makes me resilient, because most people would give up, and we don't give up.
Yeah, we don't, and which is powerful, And I think too, part of resilience is also it can be that strength that emerges, especially in a time that's difficult. No doubt, that's definitely part of it, but vulnerability is part of it too. And I think it's helpful to remember that is a strength as well. I think having epilepsy has probably made all of us more compassionate people. That's not to say that's the only way we had to develop compassion, but I think that's probably true. And just the ways that I have seen in you all, and I see in our larger community, ways that people look to take care or to be present to the needs of others and also to make their needs known. And I think we live in a larger culture where people try to hide needs, all kinds of needs, or don't know how to voice that. And I think you all are excellent models, role models really, of living that way, honoring your own needs, the needs of your body, honoring that in other people. And I think that is a culture change we need in this world. And so I thank you for that also. To everyone here, we have 4 minutes left. I'm wondering if anyone has another question or a comment you'd like to add. And then, then we'll thank our wonderful panelists and let you know how you can find this recording later, too, if you want to listen or share it with others. Does anybody have a question or comment, especially someone who may have not spoken yet?
This is Russ. I have a question about whether you've thought about kind of your long-term goals in terms of living situation, or maybe short-term and long-term goals in terms of where you would want to live, or what sort of setting you'd want to live in. Would it be with a roommate? Are there what have your experiences been in dorms or in student housing or that type of thing? Just, how does your epilepsy impact your goals for what living situation you see for yourself?
Yeah, great question. Anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah. Please. Go ahead.
I try and make realistic goals for myself. So I know that I want to live with probably a roommate in the future, and I really would like to have a seizure response dog as well. But honestly, I live every day, just day by day, and I feel like that's the best way to take it sometimes.
That's great. Anyone else?
So I personally lived in the dorms my first 2 years at Western, and I lived with the same roommate, and then the same roommate and I moved into on-campus apartments that were right behind the building that I had my classes in. So it was a very short walk. And because we were right on campus, everything was right there. And we lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with 2 other friends of ours. And now I live in a house with a roommate. And in the summer, I'll go back to living in Grand Rapids with the Agee family that is very epilepsy conscientious. So I think in the future, I also see myself in the far, far future, I see myself living in a house with a roommate and or significant other and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Well, you all, I just cannot thank you enough for not only what you shared tonight, but just being who you are and the ways that you are building community, the ways that you are being built up in community. And I want you to know how deeply grateful we are for what you're sharing and the ways that you are leading us, and you definitely are doing that. To everyone, I just want you to know that this recording will be made available. It will be on our website, which is epilepsymichigan.org. And if you go under the tab that says programs, you can just scroll down to learn and share conference calls. The recording will be there, as well as every recording we have ever done for a learn and share conference call. There are a wealth of topics there to explore. We'll also be on our YouTube channel, which is Epilepsy Michigan. So you can find things there. Everyone who's on this call tonight, please know that you matter to us. We're so grateful you're a part of our community. Thank you for coming tonight. If you have any additional questions about things we explored tonight or maybe anything else, you can reach us at our Here For You helpline, which is 1-800-377-6226. Everyone have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.